This morning's program is actually backed by popular demand. James Anthony Magni has an immensely, he was an immensely popular AA speaker back in 2011. I think he was number 2 or number 3. And for that program and for this program, special thanks go to public relations firm Penelope Francis and Company, who organized us and did a beautiful job, and she's sitting right here in the front row. So these programs take a lot of effort, and thank you, Penelope. Jim's program today is entitled LA's Importance in the Contemporary Real Estate Market, How to Create, Promote, Offer, and Sell to the World. Sounds like a Tony Robbins program, but it's going to be much better, I guarantee it. No pun intended, but good paintings and art pieces, they both have frames. And I can't think of a better frame for Jim than to have Mary Norris officially introduce him in just a moment. But I'd like to introduce you to Mary Norris. And before I go over a couple of words I have prepared for her, Mary's absolutely terrific, one of the chicest ladies I've ever known, as you'll see in a moment when she's up here. If I ever have a contemporary art question of any nature, she's the one I call. Then I call Jim. But those two educate me greatly because I struggle with this topic. It's a huge topic in Los Angeles. It's an important one to know. For me, it's easy to know the past. I think it is for most of us because in the past, retrospect is always 20/20, or I think it's hindsight is 20/20. But with contemporary art, we're swirling about in the middle of it right now, and so sometimes it's hard to gain perspective until you're out of it. But we're in the eye of the storm, so to speak, here in Los Angeles, so we really need to have a working definition, particularly as agents selling architectural homes. I first met Mary Norris here at Pacific Design Center in the mid-1990s, and we have been friends and colleagues ever since. We were both in the management office together. Mary's involvement with art began with the Santa Barbara Museum of Art in the 1970s. She would return to Los Angeles, become an art collector and art consultant, and she even helped spearhead, I'm sure she probably did it herself, the Museum of Contemporary Arts, founding back in, I believe, 1979. So Mary's been around. Mary's a big deal. She was also a key fundraiser in the early days, and in 1984, then Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley would appoint her as the head of the Cultural Affairs Commission. She's one of the original board of directors for the Pasadena Museum of California Art, which recently celebrated its 10th anniversary. And she has served on the board of directors for SCIAR, the Southern California Institute of Architecture, for the past 25 years. And in our own community, Mary was the public art consultant for the West Hollywood Library, right across the street, and the Andaz Hyatt in West Hollywood. My favorite project, though, Mary ever spearheaded, are the lighted pylons that you see when you're exiting LAX. Those tall pylons. I think there's probably about 20 to 25 that light in multicolors. That is Mary Norris's project. I once asked Mary what she loves to do the most, and she said, to advise in the purchasing and art installation of art in people's homes and offices. I can't imagine anyone who's more appropriate than Mary to thoroughly introduce James Anthony Magni, a fine educator and perhaps one of the finest purveyors of modernism in our lifetimes. So please welcome Mary. And she made me promise to get the microphone right.
Thank you, Fred. Hello, everybody. Haven't been up here for a long time. I did West Week in 1996, which seems like 100 years ago, because it is. I'm really thrilled to introduce Jim Magni, whom I used to see a lot of, not so much recently, but I'm glad to see him again because he's such a star in his world. And to quote from his book, interior design is an intimate business. It takes not only an expert eye and exhaustive knowledge of history and considerable technical expertise, but also a genuine interest in the lives of others and empathy for the foibles and idiosyncrasies of the human experience. All of these Jim has in spades. He approaches design the same way he approaches life, as a process of distilling the truly profound from the superfluous and the mundane. In that respect, creating a home is no ordinary exercise, which you will see, but a journey towards awareness and enlightenment. It demands a tenacious pursuit in the hope of building a richer, more substantive future. That's what makes the homes that Jim designed so special, and that's what makes Magni modern. Please welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Wow, thanks, Mary. That was a forward from Mayor Russ. He wrote the forward to our book. And I thought it had a lot to do with what realtors and what designers and architects do. I think there's a lot of similarity to what we do. So in preparation for today's conversation, I wondered what would be helpful to you as realtors. And I wanted to share some of my personal journey that has contributed to my success to date, and I hope this information might help you. I've had many brilliant business people that have been mentors and clients who have helped me along the way. I asked for help. They were willing to help. They showed me their business skills or their different ideas that helped me with my practice some 25 years ago. And I think it's important that we all reach out to them. We have this pool of clients that are some of the brightest people in the world that we work for. I think it's important that we show our gratitude for their help. I know that my career would not be the same without this learning process. So some of the things that I learned from them for sure is that we learn by doing. And in doing, sometimes we make a lot of wrong turns, what we perceive as wrong turns or mistakes. And I think that those wrong turns are the exact path that we're intended to be on to learn and gain knowledge that we're supposed to get. That's what makes us really fantastic at our jobs eventually. It's just we don't know it when we're in it, when we're younger doing this. I think it's important to learn to relax into that process and understand that we don't critique our days as good days or bad days, that we just know that it's part of the process and it's taking us somewhere and eventually we'll get there. I wish somebody had shown me a picture of what my career was going to look like in 20 years and I would have had a much more enjoyable time going through it. So I said, in a lot of ways, your job and my job are the same. And Mayor Russ's forward, it describes that we're expected to both have analytical skills and creative talents that equal measure. That's a tough bill to fill. Our clients also expect to increase their investment when they go to sell these properties. And I think what's important is that the younger generation that lives on the internet, they've grown up on the all-powerful internet. It defines them, it defines their companies. The manner in which that we communicate these services and our products, everything about that is being judged all the time on the internet. People worldwide are tapped into us, and they're watching what we do and how we do it. And it's a little different ballgame than what we had before. I think the one thing I know for sure from my mentors and from personal experience is we never ever get a second chance to make a first impression. Never ever. That's it. So we have to establish ourselves as forerunners in this industry, and how do we learn to set ourselves apart in sort of a new world, a world where the internet is an important tool. I'm going to show you an abbreviated 2-minute video that my friend Guru Penelope Francis and her team created to market my new book, Magni Modernism. And then after that clip, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the backstory and how it helped you sell real estate. So this is about a little over 2 minutes. think design is sort of the way you present yourself in the world. The way a table is set, the way your one pair of good shoes are kept polished, that's design.
And we see it in very simple ways all around us.
I don't care if it's a film, or if it's music or dance, or graphic design, or product design.
This sort of universality of design is really more powerful than it's ever been.
And the internet has opened so many positive aspects of making more people aware of things.
So people are suddenly, without realizing it, completely aware of the multicultural differences, how they fold together, where things came from, what things are supposed to look like.
There is an accessibility of invention that the internet affords people, is undoubtedly changing the face of design.
But from the camera that's photographing this right now, to the chair that I'm sitting on, to the suit and tie that I'm wearing, meals that I eat, this idea of design is in absolutely everything that I do.
Things that are timeless, that you love 100 years later, those are the things that I love. We had a woman from Korea, a very, very wealthy woman, call us about a home that we did 20 years ago. And she's looking at that work 20 years later, and interior design, as we know it, can be pretty transitory. I mean, it can be trendy, but I love the fact that she was reacting to something that we did 20 years ago. So this video was one of a 4-part series, and I'm a publisher in New York, Abrams Publishing. They've been in business since '49, doing beautiful art books. And publishing, as you know, is kind of a conservative, traditional type of business. And they were not in love with this idea of the video. They were not in love with these videos. And between talking with book publishers, book agents, branding consultants, media experts, I ended up very confused about this series of 4 videos that we're going to go out, because it's your name and your face on it. But I think that, I've always said the end result speaks for itself. Last Tuesday, the LA Times ran a very big story about the book. And it's not so much about the book as it was that what attracted them was the unique, novel, and almost inspirational way that this book was marketed to the world through video and through these almost short films and how creative they are. So not only the LA Times, but First Dibs did a 14-page story. We've had multiple media outlets do stories about Magni Modernism because of the way this has been innovatively marketed. And I think that what we're looking for today is what works and what doesn't work. So we're being charged with being very knowledgeable. That's the first thing that people expect us. They want us to know our stuff. And last year we talked about contemporary architecture, and we wanted to recap a little bit of that, just some highlights. Because it gets confusing. What's modern, what's mid-century, what's contemporary? So I'm going to go through these pretty quickly. This basically starts out with the story of how modernism came about. On the right you see expressive modernism, in the middle you see analytical modernism. I always think of, I'm going to give you clip notes of what I think this is about. I think expressive modernism is more about organic things, free-flowing things. Maybe if you've been to Spain and seen Anthony Magni's work, things that blend with nature. Analytical modernism is more about a German philosophy or European philosophy that's very much about tectonics. This is sort of not too important. I'm going to talk about Louis Sullivan, who was a forebearer of modernism. Here we talk about Richard Neutra, Philip Johnson, Mies van der Rohe, Corbusier, and Walter Gropius. We always hear those names, starting at the top, working all the way down to the bottom with Gropius and Neutra at the top. We hear about what happened in the 50s and 60s, bringing a new language to America. This is more the organic approach I was talking to you about with Frank Lloyd Wright, one of our world's greatest architects. He wanted to blend buildings with nature. That's the Salk Institute, and that's the little Schindler house on Kings Road. And so from there it evolved into, from left to right you see Quincy Jones and Ralph Soriano. In the upper right you see the famous Stahl House, Pierre Coney's house, photographed by Schulman. You see Charles and Ray Ames in the lower right, and then we go to the Richard Neutra house and sort of see how it's evolved. And of course, mid-century means middle of the century. That's when this was born. This style was born, and California had a lot to do with that. This is the birthplace of a lot of that. Postmodernism, which we're not going to talk too much about. This just shows kind of a timeline of things going from postmodernism on the left, minimalism on the right, and then deconstructivism on the far right. So, what makes a home contemporary? What does it look like? Why is it important, and who buys it? Excuse me. I think the following images are going to show us some key characteristics of contemporary. So when we're selling these properties, we sort of basically know what constitutes a contemporary home. An open floor plan for sure, which is very different than rooms, spaces. These are projects of Magni design that are in the book, but I think ones that hopefully will prove today a lot of what we're talking about. Simplified interior detailing. In traditional homes, which is certainly legitimate but very different, you have baseboards, you crown moldings, and all kinds of places to hide flaws. With contemporary detailing, you don't have that. And you have a very different buyer. You have a very type A kind of buyer who expects these sorts of things. Contemporary kitchens and baths. Kitchens are part of the living space. They're no longer hidden in the back. They're part of the entertaining space. Baths become resort spas. Blurring the line between inside and outside. It's very much about California living. It's very much about contemporary living. It's a little harder to do on a classical home with French doors. With contemporary work, these walls of glass in the lower right, what we're looking at in the foreground is the inside, and then, the outside courtyard, and there's the inside. And those dark lines in the middle show where all these huge panes of glass slid back into a wall. So we blur those lines because we have a great climate here, which is certainly something to sell. This is technology, which has become very important to contemporary projects, and then the green issue is a very important part of the contemporary buyer. So these next images I want to show you are from Magni Design and from the book, and I've intentionally shown 4 projects that are all contemporary. One is from Moscow, 2 are from Orange County in Laguna and Corona del Mar, and 1 is in Truesdale. And again, hopefully they'll illustrate much of what I'm talking about. This project is down in Corona del Mar and overlooks a waterway. It happens to be the cover of our book, but it shows contemporary living and how it flows from inside to outside. Kitchen's part of the living space. The lower level, this is a lower level right by, you can overlook the ocean, the water. It's very much of a resort bar, recreational area. And there's your view. It's usually where the Christmas parade goes through. This project is up above Kings Road, and it was a remodel on an existing house, an extensive remodel, almost a new house. That's the front entryway that you see. It's on Chrysler. You can start to see how these houses have a very soulful way of being. They're not cold and uninviting. They're very warm. We're going to talk a little bit later about how realtors and designers can create this sort of soulful element that's necessary to promote contemporary work. This is up in Truesdale. This is a big overhaul. We'll see a big before and after of this. Again, big open plans, views outside with panes of glass that slide. No detailing, no baseboards, no crowns, no places to hide anything. This project is down in Laguna. It was a smaller house with a smaller budget. But it gives you the site location pretty quickly. You walk straight from the front door into a very simple house, and it's all about the view. And this is probably a house you could show empty. We're going to talk about staging in a minute. This is Moscow. It's about 30,000 square feet. Moscow is an interesting place to work because it's so new in terms of being opened up to design possibilities. They don't have a lot of resources there, so a lot of things are made here and brought over. People think of Russians as having very elaborate gold leaf taste, and that's not true. This is a 3-level house. You can see, because they're indoors so much of the time, there's the spa level on the bottom, the main living space, and then the bedrooms upstairs. This is entering into the home. You can see the scale of this house. What you're seeing in the back there is a guest house that you'll get a better shot of later. Dining room on the left, living room on the right. Obviously, with 30,000 square feet, you could afford to have a separate dining room and a separate living room. That's not what contemporary design is about. That gives you the scale of the house. That photograph on the right shows from the upper level sort of library music room down into the main entry gallery. Kitchen and family spaces. And that master bedroom. So I think whether we're designing and building or buying and selling homes for our clients, it's vital that we know our clients intimately. At Magni Design, we developed a 20-page questionnaire we've used for years called the Client Personality Profile. And I think realtors spend time doing this, but not probably deep enough. As I talked to several realtors that are very successful, and one of the things we talked about was perhaps creating a questionnaire that's a little bit deeper. At our office, we asked them about, we said Corbusier, which is a great famous architect in the 20s, said, a house is a machine for living. So if that's the premise, how does the machine work? You know, what time do they get up? What are their daily patterns? How do they entertain? Do you entertain casually versus formally? What does that mean? Casual to some people is caviar and champagne when you go to their home, and other people is beer and pizza on the floor. So you've got to get really slice that in very thin. We want to know what their favorite colors are, what foreign countries they've traveled to that they have emotionally have been moved by. We want to know if they've collected images or photos over the years of houses that they loved. We want to know how they want to be remembered when somebody comes over to their home and visits Mr. and Mrs. Jones. Well, what's the takeaway on that? How do they want to be viewed in the world? And all this process streamlines our jobs, my job, your job, and it's a lot less frustrating because we intimately know what the clients are looking for. So who buys contemporary real estate? What's the client look like? I think LA is full of risk takers, and it's considered the creative capital of the world. People come here from all over the world in search of that California dream. We've had a Saudi client, a royal family, who worked on a house for 7 years for them, and I know with Christina Kramer, who I see here today. Thank you for coming. And we saw what they were looking for when they came here. They envisioned streamlined houses, perhaps on stilts looking over the city of Angels with 360-degree views. They wanted it filled with photos of surfers, with iconic images of, old movie stars. They want to know the stories of, did Lana Turner once live here? They're not afraid to buy a blank canvas. A contemporary buyer is not. And I think that confident people buy contemporary homes. I think they're very type A, very OCD. I think that there's a confidence to a contemporary home buyer. So I think if we moved to the south of France, we often kind of vision in our minds what kind of house we would live in, a little house. We can kind of play it out in our mind. We can probably close our eyes and smell the lavender. And my premise is that here we are in LA, and no one wants to see LA age. It's like time has been halted on many levels that we don't want to get into today. But it's still the 60s here, and LA is the inventor, it's the capital of cool and hip and creativity. LA was the birthplace to not only an architectural style, but a lifestyle. And yes, it has evolved in 2013, but we still have the same expectations of it being cool and hip. So I think of like Sean Connery and Paul Newman, Elizabeth Taylor, and George Clooney and Meryl Streep, and I think no matter what age, when do these people stop becoming relevant, stop becoming cool, and stop becoming hip? It's like a time warp. They always will be. And I think that's much of what LA stands for, and it's what we promote and should sell. So to sell it, we're charged with being knowledgeable about all areas of real estate. And how do we do this? You know, I have always thought composing a great team is probably one of the most important things to do. And for me, it was surrounding myself with my weak links. I knew what my weaknesses were, and I surrounded myself with people that could bolster my talents. And I think it starts with a great photographer. I got on the MLS listing, and I got on a few sites, and I was so terribly disappointed. I think LA is full of young artists who are all trying to get noticed. And even, they don't know how to meet us, and even if they did meet us, they wouldn't know how to sell themselves, because that's the nature of artists. So I think that it's our job to help them, show them ways that we can be mutually beneficial for one another. So we need to photograph these places in a unique way, because they're going to be seen worldwide and they're going to be judged. I've already discussed the power of a unique presentation with Penelope's video. It worked. So in addition, you need a talented graphic designer. Von Doe is a brilliant graphic designer that I've worked with for years. To present the images in a way that potential buyers can envision themselves spending the rest of their lives in, perhaps raising a family in. And I believe that wholeheartedly it is our job to instill a soulfulness into these properties. So we need stylists to style them appropriately. I've got a few images that I want to address. I'm a little underwhelmed also not only with MLS, but this idea of staging. I think it can be a liability if it's not done well. And then finally, we need branding consultants to create destinations and identities. Branding experts do this for restaurants, they do it for perfume companies, they do it for fashion designers, they do it for celebrities, so why not realtors and why not properties? And I challenge you to ask yourself, what is your style? How do people perceive you in the marketplace? Are you knowledgeable? Do you specialize in a particular area? Are you known for selling a particular style? How do you brand your multi-million-dollar listings, or for that matter, all your listings? I think to possess the depth of knowledge and artistic skills, as I said, we need a huge team. We need a great team around us. And none of us can do it alone and be outstanding in all areas. We can do it sort of halfway, but we can't be outstanding. And you might say to me, well, I don't have the budget at this point in time in my career. I'm just getting started, or I don't have the budget for this small of a property. Very early on in my career, I surrounded myself with smarter people than me. I traded services. I traded furniture, I traded dinners, I traded spa treatments, whatever it took to entice them to lend me their talents. That part I was smart on. I'm remaining very loyal to these people, and I have promised them that as the projects and the profits grew, so would our relationship. So if you need to sign an agreement with them, sign an agreement with them. But the important thing is to gather your team of people and then stay loyal to them. And I think loyalty is a huge currency. In the real estate market, just like in the finish line, there's very little loyalty. And it's an old-fashioned idea that I believe can be your huge currency as well. So we need to find these creative geniuses who are out there and teach them how to work with us to photograph, to use graphic artists, web designers, and stylists, and to help each other, and to help us in cooperation versus competition. And it's sort of like the old-fashioned idea farmers had when at harvest time. You know, it's a very powerful thing to create the synergy help one another. You might be thinking that LA real estate's heating up. I heard a lot of realtors say, well, I don't really care about the MLS listings, a lot of hot listings are what I care about. So nothing ever hits the MLS, we get multiple offers, it's heating up, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. And my point is that you need to remember two things. The market fluctuates, we all know that from just 5 years ago, as far as nothing. And that this is a referral business. So ask yourself, how are you branding yourself, and what are you doing to make a memorable mark on your clients and your peers? Almost every person that you meet is a potential client in real estate. That's tough, because you've always got to be on. But it's important to understand. And I think too often we're interested in the short run, just the sale. And I think we need to focus on creating a reputation for being knowledgeable and honest, talented and creative. And I know for certain that if you do that, it secures a place for yourself of success, both personally and professionally. So as we talk about presentation skills, I don't think it would be complete without talking about a before and after. So I want to show you a couple of examples of some things that I saw on the MLS and a couple of places that I found either helpful or not helpful, but we can learn from them either way. I think this is a before and after that we can show clients. I think that we'll talk about the MLS in other ways that we communicate. But a floor plan is always a nice thing to show someone. In this particular case, the upper left is the before, and the lower right is the after. We just pay particular attention to these sort of rounded shapes in the middle and this sort of bowed shape in the front. And what I think is important to this is the house on the left in Truesdale, and that's the house on the right in Truesdale. And again, this is the back side of the house. Cool, the landscaping. This is up on Crystal Way, that house I showed you earlier. This was nearly a tear down, but again, a before and an after. Stairwell. This was built on a hillside, so there were 3 levels. And sort of a back view, showing the back patio and a view. I think that what these tools do is they help us show clients, to clients what a house can become, what its potential is. And whether it's showing them examples of similar houses to theirs, or computer-generated illustrations, which today I can't hardly tell the difference. They've gotten so good, and we really need to tune into that, tap into that, and use that energy from these illustrations. They're huge tools. Again, our job is to help them envision. It broadens the potential of the buyer's imagination. We assume that people can read floor plans. We assume that people can envision when we tell them, well, we can knock this piece of glass out, or we can do this, or we can do that. I think we have to now show them. Our clients, especially from overseas, they want to see a rendering on almost every room these days. We used to do a rendering for the main room. Now we do 20 renderings showing them everything. So we have to know all the different tricks to help them envision buying this property and to create their own unique vision. In this way, we do create inventory. It's not just building new houses, but it's taking our team that we've talked about, our creative team, and showing them how we can remodel buildings to be new again. The MLS that I told you about, that I think it needs a complete overhaul. I think it's dated, and I think it should be the place where people go to get really accurate, good information. And it kind of reminds me of WebMD, which we've all been on, and we've all diagnosed ourselves with something, or someone we know, and it's like, enough information to be dangerous. It's, you know, my doctor friends laugh at it. MLS is kind of that way right now. I think it needs to go further. I think it's a function of sort of garbage in, garbage out. This was a house I saw that read as contemporary. You know, the categories in real estate: contemporary, Mediterranean, contemporary, modern. You know, they're not accurate, number one. And I think the more versed you are, the better it's going to help you. This was listed as a contemporary. And I thought, well, okay. All I'm really seeing is this rusticated beam ceiling. If I don't like rusticated beam ceilings, I'm screwed. No one's going to like it. So I'm thinking, you know, if I were a realtor, what would I do to help broaden my audience? This is a very specific audience that's going to like this. In 30 minutes, you paint the ceiling white in Photoshop. I had somebody on my team do it. And all of a sudden, I think it looks like a more contemporary space, and a lot more people can understand it. This is another property, I don't recall the address. I like the fact that it gives you this big aerial view of the house, so you kind of know how the house is situated on the land. You see the big shot of the entry motor court. But then you see this. And it's like Elton John's piano and someone's motorcycle, and I think that this must be an eccentric person who lived there. No judgments. That's the one thing I'm learning every day is no judgment. It is what it is. But the problem is that I'm trying to sell this house and it's furnished this way, that again it limits us. Because we all know that when people walk into a home, they get focused on the furniture. They don't look at the shell. And if they're looking at the furniture, what they're seeing is this. This might be a beautiful contemporary home. But if you don't like Roche Bourbois' Japanese designer series, I don't recall the name of the designer, you're not going to like this home. Here's another one. I mean, it's like, what's better, bad staging or no staging? And then there's this beautiful gem. I love this house. I talked to my friend Jim Crane last night. He said this house sold, and it appears, if I did the math right, at $3,000 a foot, $3,065 a square foot. On Tanager Way, look at this presentation. There's a floor plan. There's a big city view showing you the property. And you may not love all of it, but it gives you a very cohesive vision of living there. So I think that what the, if we can have an influence on MLS or Redfin or any of these other places to go, I think what we need to communicate is we have to go from macro scale to micro scale when we're presenting our property. We need to see the aerial view that's available, we need to see the property, we need to see the front, back, and sides of that, and then we need to lead us through in a very logical, sequential order. So that one experiences the property exactly the way you would on the internet is if you were standing walking to the property, a virtual tour for each and every property that you represent. And by the way, that's what you do, you represent these properties and these people, and it's a big responsibility. I think whether the, I don't know if it's a $20 million sale or a $2 million sale or a $1 million sale, but I think that there have to be varying degrees of very beautiful presentations from, extremely elaborate to maybe they're just simple, thoughtful, and unique ways to present these properties. But they have to be coherent, including the MLS. So now on brochures and videos and short films, which that's the direction that things are going, I want to show you this brochure of Rob Guillaume. He's a realtor in Orange County. He put together on a home I designed in an area called China Cove. It's pretty unremarkable. But what Rob did in this brochure, I was impressed with. He hired his own photographer, graphic designer for this property. It didn't have any special provenance. The area is not something really fabulous. But after what Rob was done, this China Cove property became very important. Why did it become important? Because he told us it was. He told us it was through his presentation. So, I can kind of get the idea of what this house might be like and what it might be like to live here, if you had a mere $14 million. So I think we have to brainstorm with our creative team on using graphics and videos or even short films and how to set yourself apart and your properties apart from the rest. And they have to be truly inspirational. So to wrap up a lot of what I'm talking about here, I think from the very beginning, the first things that we touch when we meet a prospective buyer and understand that buyer and really work with them on writing a profile or a questionnaire to know them intimately, to then researching their property, that particular area. We have to be very knowledgeable. There's legal aspects that we have to know. I had a friend of mine who lost a great deal of money, and he didn't, and some people have, if they lose $1 million and they have 30, it's no big deal. But if you have $2 million and you lose $1 million, it's a big deal. And it's probably a legal case that you might all know of, but it devastated he and his partner because they sold a house and it was on 8 feet of property that they didn't know wasn't theirs. And it went on and on and on, and they lost every case. They appealed, they lost every case. And I feel like it's something that a realtor should really know about. So when things like that, I'm told about these stories from realtors, it reminds me that a lot of people think that decorators and realtors and hairdressers are all kind of these slightly emotional, creative people, but they're not very smart. They're not very knowledgeable. Their depth or capacity of knowledge isn't very deep. And I say that's bullshit. But we have to prove that. And in order to prove that, we have to know our stuff. We have to work extremely hard at all aspects. And I think that if you get into real estate, we all know this is a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job. So back to what I was saying, I think we have to meet the buyer or the seller. We have to know their property intimately. We have to know everything about that property. We have to understand the area. We have to understand the architecture. We have to understand how to show through illustrations how we can make our architecture sing, to be better than it really is. So everything we touch becomes important. It's more important today, unfortunately, than ever before. Recently, we were having this big controversy about sending out invitations to a party for our book launch. Do you send them out through email or do you do a hard copy? Guess what we figured out? Both. We're in that world. Both. You have to do everything. Both ways. Always. Until it changes, that's what we do. So I think we have to create and understand the client's lifestyle. We mobilize our creative team who has to be on the same page. They have to be on the same point, and as I learned as well, they have the same brand message. We're charged with creating visual communications, proving that we do understand and that we are deeply knowledgeable about the clients, and that the end result speaks for itself. So when we combine all these skills, it becomes very clear to people that we are passionate about architecture. And our visuals must expand the realities of existing architecture, expand them toward new possibilities and fantasies that our clients have of living in a great lot and a great home. And I think that's what we're charged to do. So thank you very much for today's morning.